Jai Guru, everyone.
Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.
Welcome to this episode of today's podcast. Today we are discussing minute 14 of the movie Awake, the life of Yogananda. And I'm joined as always by Priyank and Chris. Priyank, how are you doing today?
Very good. Superb. Thank you.
Excellent. And how about you, Chris?
Fantastic. Yeah, the weather's finally picking up. It's now summertime in Northern Ireland.
Nice.
So, what's not to smile about, really? Sunshine.
Perfect. Sounds really good. So minute 14, let me just give a quick overview. So he had the vision of going to America, and now it's happening. He is on the boat. He has, you heard his voice where he says, I knew I would dwell in lands far away. And we will go through this. Then you will see a little bit of the 20s in America, this Charleston song that is like embodying a bit the time that he's and the cultural difference that he's getting into, and his arrival at Boston Harbor and a few of the devotees he's going to meet there. So let's jump right in. So he's going. Where we left off was he had the vision of going to America, and he knew this was the time now. He saw people in America. I think he even saw the vision of Mother Center, right? And now he's in the autobiography, the way it starts is he entrains straight for Kolkata the next day, and off he goes. But after reading Phil Goldberg's book, there's like a few little stories in between that about him interacting with Sri Yukteswar and a few other things. Do you want to start talking about this, Priyank?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, it's interesting. In the autobiography of a yogi, he just says there was certain miraculous events that happened, but they'll be too numerous or something to talk about in these pages. So he doesn't actually go into the detail. But thankfully, we know from Phil Goldberg's lovely research, and we heard him previously in our special interview. So if you haven't heard that, he authored a biography of Yogananda, which is a really very good supplement to the autobiography of a yogi. So yeah, so before he took leave for America, obviously a few things happened. Firstly, how did he first approach getting permission from Sri Yukteswar? Because he obviously, when you're under the discipleship of a guru, you don't just take such drastic actions such as that. Who wants to read that out about him speaking to Guruji, his Guruji at the time? Chris?
Go on. I'll give it a whirl, shall I?
Go for it. Yes.
Yeah. So we have these notes here. So we'll go ahead and read. So before Yogananda did take the trip, there's a story here where he says, "My head in a whirl, I sought out Sri Yukteswar in Serampore. Guruji, I have just been invited to address a religious congress in America. Shall I go?" The response was, "All doors are open for you," Master replied simply. "It's now or never." "But sir," I said in dismay, "what do I know about public speaking? Seldom have I given a lecture, and never in English. English or no English, your words on yoga shall be heard in the West." I laughed. "Well, dear Guruji, I hardly think the Americans will learn Bengali. Please bless me with a push over the hurdles of the English language." And did he get that push? Yes.
I love this bit because there's two like really powerful kind of prophetic statements in there, isn't it? One, he says all doors are open for you, and that's an interesting parallel even for us, because we think that our lives are restricted in some way. You go and do this, you study this field, so conventionally you'll only go and work in this area, right? But actually there's people that study this and go and golf and do that. That's just a stepping stone to something completely different. So I really like that all doors are open to you. And he also says, English or no English, your words shall be heard in the West. And that's a really powerful statement. I think it kind of hits home, like how powerful this moment was for Yogananda. I also liked the previous in Yukteswar. Previously, I said something similarly. When Yogananda was studying for his exams and he hadn't prepared, and he needed. Sri Yukteswar said, "You'll go to the West one day, so you need to qualify with a degree." And Yogananda said, I haven't studied. I've been spending all my time with you in the ashram. And then Sri Yukteswar says something along the lines of the moon and the sun have a more chance of switching positions than you not obtaining your degree. And I thought, oh, wow, that is just so profound. Right. So yeah, this kind of rings all in the same. I really love this section of the autobiography of Yogi.
Yeah, I feel like this all doors are open for you, it's now or never is basically I mean, I'm not sure how this works for avatars, but it's like he's talking about the karma as well, right? Is it like, I feel like this happens in our lives as well, right? Like we try something and we try and we try, and then there's a moment there where it happens. All the doors are open for you. So basically that he knew that he was able to go. And the other thing I find really cool in this paragraph is that he wouldn't go without asking permission to Sri Yukteswar, because he wants to do the divine plan. He's not doing his plan, right? So he wants to know, he's doing this for us again, I'm assuming, right? He probably like telepathically talked to Sri Yukteswar already, but he's like saying, Guruji, am I in tune with you? Is this what I should be doing? Obviously. And I really like that he's doing it so obviously for us.
Yeah, he kind of needed to hear it from Sri Yukteswar for him to say the words. I think much like when he asked, "Do you love me?" He wanted to hear his guru say, "I love you." Of course, I love. Do you know where my mind goes actually? What just listening to you guys speak and reading that is, you know the story where Yogananda, I believe, and correct me on this, guys, but in the autobiography, when Yogananda is being taught by Sri Yukteswar, and there's a disciple that comes into the midst that really Sri Yukteswar takes a shining to. He kind of takes a real liking to this young boy, and Yogananda was jealous, and he kind of thought, well, gosh, he's getting all this adoration from the guru, from my guru. I want this. But there was a moment where the young devotee went off the tracks, and he didn't come back to the hermitage. And I think Sri Yukteswar, I think he showed some remorse, right? I think he showed some dismay that this had happened and this had occurred. So when I hear this, all doors are open to you, but you have to act. It's now or never. Do it. You can't sit and do nothing. You have to go and you have to do the work. And it reminds me of that story. Like this person, for whatever reason, at that time, didn't do the work that he needed to do to stick on the path. But Yogananda really jumped in with all of his soul and spirit, which I love.
Yeah, that's a great example. And 10 extra points if anyone remembers the name of that disciple.
No charge.
Let's back to you. Reflect that back on you. Do you know the name? Or is this
no.
Okay, I thought you were going to come up with a glorious answer.
No. I wish I could. That would have been, but then I would be giving 10 extra points to myself. That would also not be there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, maybe a listener can remind us.
Yes. Absolutely. And should we, the next person Yogananda talks to, if I may move on to his dad, which is also important, right? Because his dad was, for a long time, his dad had the feeling Mukunda has finally found a career that is good for him, and now he is like changing everything again. So he was maybe not super happy. Someone want to read this paragraph?
You read it, Mike.
I do it. Okay, so he had this exchange with his father. He said, "Perhaps we shall not meet again in this life." Father, who was 67 at this time, spoke sadly, and an intuitive conviction prompted me to reply, "Surely the Lord will bring us together once more." And of course, we know that this is true because when he came to India in the 30s, they met again one more time. And we know how this exchange was also about money. When they talked, it was Mukunda or Yogananda. He basically needed some money for the ship, and he needed some money to actually spend some time in Boston. And his dad first said he wouldn't support him, and then he had some kind of experience the next night, and the next morning he came to him and gave him a big sum of money, which is kind of so much how this kind of relationship works between Yogananda and his father, because his father is on the one hand trying to be a good parent, but on the other hand he's also a devout disciple of Lahiri Mahashai. And also Lahiri Mahashai already told him that your son will go to America, so it was probably not a complete surprise to him.
Yeah, it's interesting that because even though he knew that in the back of his mind and all these miraculous events that he would have experienced his son go through, and in the end he was really proud of his Yogananda's school, for example, in Ranchi, and he was saying like, I was wrong, you've done great things. So he would have known all these things. So in his heart he would have known, but initially it's still he has that feeling of, I don't want my son or any of my children to be far away from me. So initially, he kind of like gave Yogananda the cold shoulder treatment and saying, "How are you going to fund this crazy expedition?" kind of thing. I'm not going to fund you. That stubborn father approach, which was interesting. But
Yeah.
there's another interesting parallel that I could read out from Phil Goldsberg's book, which says about him getting to America, which is now all he had to do was get to America in time for the Congress. So this is the Congress of World Religions. And what actually happened was, who knows actually, does anyone know how, or did I discuss this in the past, how he actually got to be enrolled for the Congress?
I know a little bit about it. I know there was some other person who was supposed to go, but I'm sure you know in more detail.
Yeah, so yeah, that's absolutely right. So Phil Goldberg talks about this in his book, and some eminent professor in one of the universities was due to go, and for some reason he was unable to go. And Yogananda, when he came into after Ranchi, and he came to his father's home saying, "I'm going to go to America." These guys, his father was friends with obviously some very important and prominent people through his profession, etc. They were in the next room discussing these things, and then from that discussion they said, "Oh, Yogananda, he's eminent now. Let's send Yogananda to this thing." So literally he came into his father's home from Ranchi, and then this discussion was happening, and then it ended up that he would then be the delegate to go. So that's quite coincidental. Obviously there's no such thing as coincidence, but you may not have known that. I feel like I already talked about that before, but maybe I didn't. Quite a cool part of the story, isn't it?
Yeah.
Very, very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Serendipitous. Yeah. Love a bit of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like how not only can he tell the future, but he can make the future, or Divine Mother can make the future for him. She told him, "You're going to go to America," and he doesn't need to know how am I going to get there or whatever. He just goes. He entrains for Kolkata, and then there, of course, something happens that he gets a reason to go and a means to go and the money to go all in one day, probably, or in a few days. Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, I can tell you the name of the person. It was Professor Maitra, who was supposed to go as the India's only representative. But yeah, so he sent him in his place, sent Yogananda. But let's talk about quickly how he got his of shipping, because this was during the war pretty much, the First World War. So it was quite or after it. So it was quite a uh, strange time for politics and international travel and things like that. And obviously there was all sorts of craziness happening in terms of the independence movement birthing and lots of incidents surrounding that. So there's this. I'll just read this out from the book. So now all he had to do was to get to America on the first in time for the Congress and find a way to pay for the trip. No small feat. At the shipping office, where sea voyages were ticketed, he learned that the first passenger ship to sail from India to America since the start of the war was slated for departure in about a month from that date. Even better, the SS City of Sparta, which is what it was called, would be sailing directly to Boston. Now, coincidence after coincidence after coincidence, right? Then came the bad news. The ship had been completely booked for 6 months. Yogananda told the English clerk he intended to go. He intended to be on board nonetheless. The man got angry. Not only were no berths available, he told the impertinent Swami, but it took 3 to 6 months to process passport applications. With the war recently ended and the independence movement heating up, the British government saw all Indians as potential saboteurs and revolutionaries. Yogananda insisted that the clerk write down his name in case there was a cancellation. Probably just to get rid of him, the functionary did so on his shirt cuff. Years later, Yogananda joked that he had caused the disagreeable man to ruin a good shirt. So yeah, that's a story of how he then got himself to be on the ship, because what ended up happening is fortuitously that there was a vacant space available, and then he ended up going even though it was fully booked, and also getting a passport was one miraculous feat after another, which you can also read about in the book.
Yeah, and I guess in the time back then, I'm guessing it was 1920, right? So the World War ended in 1918, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, the relationship between India and the United Kingdom was starting to unravel, right? So they were kind of more cautious about revolution and things like that. And also, traveling in general was probably not the same thing that it was today. It was a much bigger feat, and when you live in a big country like India, you probably never needed a passport in your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
To leave, and now you need one quickly. And I'm guessing 3 to 6 months. This is kind of when you back then planned something like that, you would have planned this a year in advance, I'm guessing. And now it all happens for him in a matter of days. He gets his ticket, even though none is booked. He gets his passport.
So many miracles in the space of
Yes.
maybe a few days, a few weeks.
Yeah, it reminds me of the time when he triumphantly left to go to another city as a bet with his brother. Do you remember? And he said basically, God's going to take care of me. And he had all these moments of essentially fate, stepping in to usher him through this journey. And yeah, it's continued all the way throughout his life.
Yes. So he needed the money from his father or from someone. So his father said, "Who's going to finance you? What is all this nonsense?" As he said. Yogananda answered like a monk, "God," he said. And then his father said, "I'm not going to give it to you." And then Yogananda said, "I never asked." And then he added, like a son, as an affluent and generous man, "You never can tell. You may change your mind." Never, declared Mr. Ghosh. But of course, he did change his mind, and his heart would be more, change of heart would be more accurate. The next day, admitting he was wrong to act as he did, he wrote a check to cover the cost of a first-class passage. Yogananda handed it back. He couldn't accept it, he said, if his father had been coerced by his words. Mr. Ghosh insisted. he had been adamant about not giving him the money because he didn't want to let him go. He had, after all, lost his firstborn son already at the age of 67. His Ananda had just probably passed away, his oldest brother. And the thought of losing a second to him halfway around the world was hard to bear. Then Yogananda says, Yogananda says, no, his father says, don't take it from your father, he said, of the money, but from a student of Lahiri Mahashaya. Then he cried, when are you coming back?
So amazing. And I feel like this is like a really big moment. And I like how they describe it in the autobiography when he says, you might give me the money, right? and his father says, no, I would never do that. And then he says, and then he compares this conversation with the one he had with Ananta like 20 years before in the chapter Two Penniless Boys in Brindaban.
Yeah, that's the one Chris was just referring to as well.
Yeah. Which
and
is
then his father asked, when are you coming back? Now I'll give you guys guesses as to what he says. Go on, Chris, guess. What is Yogananda say?
When God is done with me or something.
Oh, that's good. Mike, what does he say?
Yeah, I would have said when Divine Mother allows.
No, you can't say that. That answer's already taken.
Really? Okay.
I mean, I don't know. One was a bit more blunt, so I think Divine Mother sounds a bit more graceful.
He actually says, in 3 months, if the Americans don't need me. But of course, they needed him, and three months became 3 decades before father and son would have their reunion.
3 decades. So he was
67.
67, and when he came back, he was
97.
Age. Wow.
No, as in he stayed in America for 3 decades until his passing, but he came back after.
He came back 13 years.
13 years later.
Right?
Yeah. So he would have been like 90 at the time his father, or 80. Sorry, 80 would have.
80. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yes.
Grand age. You know, just to touch on this, the money aspect of this, and how, you know, from my experience, you know, we have in our ego a need to have ownership over things, and it was nice for Yogananda's father to disassociate himself with his own money, and you know, use the linkage to his devotion to God, because you know we don't actually possess anything really. You know, we have soul, and we're essentially stewardships of our vessels, from our body to our house or whatever it might be. I was thinking about this the other day, and it just sparked that thought. And I don't know if it's analyzing it too much, but I do love the idea of you know, everything in the name of God. You know, give everything else up in the name of God, essentially. But, yeah.
It must have been a big amount of money as well, because I mean, I feel like his father was always very generous, even though earlier in the autobiography you hear about him and his wife talking about money, and because she wants to give more money away and he wants to keep it more together. But later on, somewhere he basically finances himself a whole year or 2 in Boston with the money of his father. So must have been quite a large amount that he parted with.
Yes, but even after all those events, Yogananda was still uncertain that he should go, and then still, you know, worrying. On the 25th of July 1920, what happens with Mahavatar Babaji? Does someone want to read this section?
Oh, Priyank, you can.
Okay.
You can do this bit.
Open it up. I get the Babaji section. Okay, so what happened was, let me just get it up again. So 25th of July, as I said, in 1920, Yogananda said, the ageless Babaji showed up at 4 Garpur Road to put an end to all this wavering. Early that morning, Yogananda began to pray, determined to hear the voice of God, and he gets his answer. And then the form of Babaji appears. He says, "He must be Babaji." I thought, dazed, because the man before me had the features of the young Lahiri Mahashai. He answered my thought. Yes, I am Babaji. He spoke in melodiously in Hindi. Is this the first time that Yogananda meets Babaji? Then it must be, right?
I think so. Yeah, but I was just also thinking, not to interrupt the story, but were there stories that he looked similar to Lahiri?
Yes, that's
There's
coming.
stories coming. Yeah, it's
coming.
coming.
Yes,
Yes,
Oh,
like a young version of him.
yeah,
Can't wait.
yeah. Our Heavenly Father has heard your prayer. He commands me to tell you, follow the behests of your Guru and go to America. Fear not, you shall be protected. After a vibrant pause, Babaji addressed me again. You are the one I have chosen to spread the message of Kriya Yoga to the West. Long ago, I met your Guru Sri Yukteswar at the Kumbh Mela. I told him then I would send you to him for training. I was speechless, choked with devotional awe at his presence, and deeply touched to hear from his own lips that he had guided me to Sri Yukteswar. I lay prostrate before the deathless Guru. He graciously lifted me up. After telling me many things about my life, he gave me some personal instruction and uttered a few secret prophecies. Kriya Yoga, the scientific technique of God realization, he finally said with solemnity, will ultimately spread in all lands and aid in harmonizing the nations through man's personal, transcendental perception of the infinite Father. So that's then it goes on, but yeah. So he got his response from Babaji. No, none other than Babaji.
Amazing. And
And
I guess he kind of wanted that on top of it because he oftentimes Guruji always mentions the line of gurus, right? And it is important to him that he wasn't just sent by Sri Yukteswar, because I'm guessing also Sri Yukteswar sending him would have made him go to America, but it was Babaji telling Lahiri Mahashai, telling Sri Yukteswar, telling Yogananda to spread Kriya Yoga in the West. So it's like a divine mission from the highest order that he is fulfilling there. And this is basically the confirmation of that.
yes, and the last part of the story is with a gaze of majestic power, the master electrified me with a glimpse of his cosmic consciousness. What do you think that means?
I probably didn't want to fry him on the spot by giving him the entire view.
But do you think this is the same? This is the same as what Sri Yukteswar gave him when he prodded him, and after he came back from the trip, and he's got the experience in the chapter is called Experience in Cosmic Consciousness, and the Samadhi poem comes after that. Do you think it's the same thing?
Quite possibly. I mean,
a glimpse of his cosmic, but it says a glimpse of his cosmic consciousness. So it's like Babaji's cosmic consciousness, which is separate somehow to just general cosmic consciousness.
Well, there is the note there to say that he gave him sort of secret truth and knowledge, and maybe they're connected somehow, but maybe he was showing him distant realities of truth.
There's some traditions that place Babaji, Mahavatar Babaji, extremely highly, like even beyond Bhagwan Krishna and places things like that. But that's obviously not in our tradition. But yeah, he is obviously thought of extremely highly amongst not just SRF devotees, but many other paths that are across India, spiritual paths. And then and then he says, in a short while, Babaji started toward the door, remarking, "Do not try to follow me. You will not be able to do so." "Please, Babaji, don't go away," I cried repeatedly. "Take me with you." He replied, "Not now, some other time." Overcome by emotion, I disregarded his warning. As I tried to pursue him, I discovered my feet were firmly rooted to the floor. From the door, Babaji gave me a last affectionate glance. My eyes were fixed on him longingly as he raised his hand by way of benediction and walked away.
Mhm.
Amazing.
So this is the second time that his feet were unable to
Yes.
unable to
Yes,
move.
but this time it was for not to follow him. As in, with Sri Yukteswar, his feet couldn't move because he was trying to walk away.
Yes, yeah,
Now he can't follow him. But
interesting.
I'm guessing Babaji must be such a strong, loving, magnetic personality that you just probably instantly, when you're in his presence and he's about to leave, you really don't want this to happen. And he just really wanted to keep this Babaji consciousness
Mhm.
going. And I'm guessing that's what he describes there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There's another moment when I think they meet, or no, it was Lahiri Mahashan possibly meeting Babaji, where his mind, his mental state was too frenetic for being in the presence of Babaji, and it kind of scared him away. Not scared him away in that sense, but it caused him to dissipate. So at one moment he could see him, and then the next he couldn't. He disappeared in the rays of the sun. I think that was how it was put, and that was really, on reflection, I think, said that he got too excited to see him, and his mental state was not with God or peaceful in that sense. You said Kumela. Is that how you pronounce it? Kumela. For anybody who doesn't really know what that is, maybe Priyanka, do you know more about that? Can you tell us more?
No,
Yes, I'm guessing you might know if you do.
I haven't been, but I intend to go one day. It's an astronomical event that happens once every was it 12 or 13 years or something along those lines. And then there's a place along the Ganges where all sorts of mystics and saints and seers, they all seem to congregate. And it's a pilgrimage. It becomes a place of pilgrimage because of that reason. And yeah, I haven't been, but obviously Sri Yukteswar went and he got this lovely image of Mahavatar Babaji. Apparently it's crazy busy, like millions of devotees, and you can imagine all in the same place with the same spiritual ardor. So you have all sorts of people that are there, not just devotees, but also all sorts of saints, some true and some not so much. Yeah.
In the autobiography, I think Sri Yukteswar, Guruji quotes Sri Yukteswar a little bit about the Kumbh Mela, right? He says he went there very skeptical about, he saw people there that he couldn't help but judge in the beginning for not being spiritual enough or claiming things that they aren't. And then when Babaji came, Babaji just participated in everything and said, you should not judge, and found that a pretty cool story. I remember that because that's like something that happens all too easy often when you see something that is just not something as high as you expected, then you might.
Isn't it wasn't it be like the wise ant who discerns between the sugar and the sand rather than considering all of it one big mess. I'm completely ruining that beautiful part of the autobiography.
Nah.
So then we have so then now Yogananda has got his money, his passport, his invitation to go to America. He's got a personal meeting or presence or association with Mahavatar Babaji, and now it would appear he's finally ready to go.
Yeah, and there's like stories out of Phil Goldberg's Berg's book that we can still talk about, right?
Yep.
One of them was about when he first got on board the ship, which is the City of Sparta.
Yes.
I I can go ahead and read
Yeah, if
the
you read it
first
from
part of that paragraph.
yeah, read it from Sri Yukteswar.
From Sri Yukteswar.
Yeah.
Sri Yukteswar was present and no doubt proud and gratified at the Kidapur dock, which is in Kolkata, I believe,
Okay.
the next day to see him off. So Sri Yukteswar was actually there when he left, which is great.
Pretty cool, isn't it?
Yeah, so were most of Yogananda's family and the students and faculty of the Ranchi school. So he got a big goodbye from everybody, right? And Ranchi isn't even that close, right, to
No,
Kolkata.
not
So all
close,
those
yeah.
kids who came, amazing.
Pretty cool school trip though, isn't it? Today we'll be
Yeah.
going to say bye to our guru. Wow.
Amazing. And then one of those students, when he was in America as Swami Premanananda, recalled an incident from that day. Yogananda was with him and others at the ship's rail when the captain ordered him gruffly to go to his cabin or else leave the boat. Yogananda met the captain's gaze and said, "Sir, a gentleman does not speak in that manner." According to Premanananda, the humbled English captain withdrew with bowed head, speechless. Americans who looked down upon the heathens of Asia were also about to be humbled by Yogananda's dignity and erudition.
Wow. That's so cool.
Amazing, right? Like that is also something I like, how confident he is. He's not like let somebody talk down to him, because he sees the divine in everybody. So he also expects everybody to see the divine in him and meet on the same level, right? This was a different time than today, right? There was a lot more prejudice among people and a lot more difficulties of communicating. And so that there was also the language barrier, I'm guessing. I'm guessing this captain was English or American, and yeah.
Yeah, Indians were generally subservient to the English rulers, weren't they, at the time? So to stand up to the captain or whoever this chap was is quite something, because he could have easily just chucked him off the boat, couldn't he? And that would have been the end of that. There would have been some other way that he would have to have got to America.
Yeah, I think for me, like, when the significant part in this is he met the captain's gaze. You really like to meet somebody's gaze in the moment of confrontation. I could just picture, Yogananda meeting his gaze confidently, with love, but assertiveness, responding, with some authority. But, it's to go back to what Guruji was saying about Babaji. He kind of gave him a kind of insight into his consciousness. I imagine something was transferred in that moment of meeting the gaze, where maybe the English captain was, humbled to the point of never meeting somebody so saintly. Maybe there's some communication that went on, with meeting the gaze.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the paragraph continues. Should I read the rest of it?
Yeah.
So the City of Sparta, which is the ship, left Kolkata on August 2nd with a cargo of mostly jute and tea, plus 61 passengers, including 11 Indians, Yogananda plus 10 students bound for American colleges, some returning missionaries, businessmen and tourists, and 2 refugees from the Armenian massacre in Turkey. Interesting that he mentions this here. On the ship's manifest, under family name, was written Mukunda Lal Ghosh. Under given name was Swami Yogananda Giri.
Gary, yes, spelt wrong.
Gary.
Gary.
Yeah, interesting. His age was listed as 25, although he was actually 27 and a half. Well, the and a half is okay. And under calling or occupation were the typed words Brahim in charge. Interesting. That sounds like a good title. That was no doubt meant to be Brahmin, although Yogananda was not that. But the confusion was allayed with a handwritten professor. He was listed as an English speaker traveling as a British subject. Under race or people that typed Bengali, was crossed out and replaced with E.Indian. It was stamped legal entry for arranged residence verified, and written in script. Sorry, I had to scroll down a bit. Written in script, these curious notations, one under the other: political opinions, not raising funds, not liberal, except on religion. That's good to go. I mean, this whole form sounds like against human rights, in my opinion. Just having to answer to all those questions.
I love that last bit, not liberal, except on religion. And we know Yogananda to be very, very liberal in his religious outlook, isn't it? It's really good. I really love this section of the book that we've found. Everything from like them misspelling Brahmin to getting his age wrong, to getting his name slightly wrong.
Yeah.
It's just a fantastic bit of. I'd love to have that form.
Me too. But it kind of shows also how big the suppression was, right? The political suppression. There was no freedom of speech, I'm guessing. But it also looks like Yogananda made a big impression on whoever filled out that form for him. So he kind of got like when they say Bengali and then crossed out, and it says Indian, is what it says?
East Indian, that would be, yeah.
East Indian, interesting. Okay. Yeah, I wonder what all those things really meant, because they probably had a meaning at the time back then.
Yeah, and I feel like perhaps though he wanted, because an interview would have taken place at this point, right? You know, when you go through immigration, what's the purpose of your visit, all that kind of stuff. So he would have had this kind of interview, wouldn't he? And it's interesting. Like one of the things that he says that he political opinions, full stop. That's one of the things that he's got. So somehow they would have said, all right, so what's your opinion on World War One? And what do you say your independence movement? What's your affiliation? And he's got political opinions. So I would love, could you just imagine the notes that guy that must have that meeting?
Would you imagine it was an English person asking the questions?
I imagine so. Or an American person, perhaps. Or actually, maybe, yeah, whoever owns the boat, perhaps. I don't know who would have owned the boat.
It was a UK company
that
owned the boat.
And there was a UK were in control of India at the time. So very likely would have been an English officer.
Yeah, this interview must have been really interesting. But you're right. I wonder how they came to this kind of answer, not liberal except on religion. Do you think he would have asked him, are you liberal?
Do you consider yourself a Hindu? No, I'm a Hindu, Christian, Muslim, Buddhist. That's probably why he made him say that I'm liberal, or that he's liberal. He's not liberal except on religion. So he must have had very strong political opinions, but not in terms of religion.
He was going into the US at the time of a real crackdown on the alcohol scene and gambling and things like this. So which is in the pictures that we see in this minute. You know, people having fun and in the casino kind of thing. But at the time, like these things were illegal. So you had the prohibition and so on and so forth. So not liberal. Yeah, I guess it might be seen as a liberal thing to allow, live and let live, maybe. So that might have been worth noting at the time, going into the scenes of 20th century America.
Yeah, from how he spelled Brahmin, I'm guessing the person who filled out the form he didn't really know who stood in front of him there. Yeah, he just was just good. Yeah, go for it.
Would much be changed today? I mean, I don't really know. It's just, it must have been very unusual at the time.
Yeah. So on the ship, we have a very famous incident, don't we? On the ship, that's he writes about in the Autobiography of Yogi.
Yes. So on the ship, when you read the Autobiography of a Yogi, you hear this one story often, where Guruji he meets someone, and some professor on the ship finds out that Guruji is going to the Congress of Religious Liberals in Boston, and then asks Guruji to give a speech on the ship. And Guruji is like, sure, let's do it.
The
And
topic chosen for him was the battle of life and how to fight it.
yes, and we have a whole paragraph here. Chris, do you want to read that one?
Yes.
Sure, if I can find it.
And it's at the bottom.
Yeah, it's at the bottom. It's despite.
Yeah. Yes. Sorry, I wasn't actually in the area. Maybe somebody else might jump in and read it, because I don't have it.
Despite Sri Yukteswar's assurances, Yogananda remained insecure about his facility with English. His English was put to the test when he was urged to give a talk to his fellow passengers. When the captain introduced him to the audience, he was struck mute. He said that his mind went blank and he remained silent for a full 10 minutes. Some in the audience chuckled. Then the voice of the Guru came to him. "You can speak." He did, of course, and he described the lecture the way musicians describe their best performances, as flowing from some unknown source beyond their own volition. The success of that maiden voyage into English oratory did more than boost his confidence. A number of listeners gave him their cards and suggested he speak at their various locations. So that's a reading from the biography by Phil Goldberg, not the autobiography, because it's quite nice. There's little side elements like the title of the talk and the fact that other people gave him their business cards wasn't in the autobiography, which is obviously important for what's about to happen.
He did some networking straight away.
Exactly.
On the boat already before he arrived.
Exactly. But can you imagine 10 minutes not speaking?
Yeah, it must be painful. 10 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
Like,
yeah.
Imagine you stand there, you are about to give a speech, and the words are not coming to you. But it also speaks for Yogananda. He had this willpower. His Guruji told him he can do this. So at no point did he think, I'll just walk away. Instead he prayed to his Guru and said, I'm here now. You told me I can speak English. Help me. And there we go. And in the autobiography, he later mentions that he cannot recall the content of his speech, but he heard from other people that it was pretty good. Lovely. Cool. So the next thing, I think we can now skip to him actually arriving in Boston.
Yes. And the scene
he took this voyage. We kind of know the route a little bit that he took, right? I'm guessing he went around India. I'm not sure where he did all the stops, right? I wonder if he did a stop in what was back then called Bombay. If he did a stop somewhere in Egypt because he went through the Suez Canal, right?
Yeah.
And then he might have stopped somewhere in Southern Europe. I'm not sure where the stops were, and then he would have gone crossing the Atlantic from there to. I'm actually not sure. Did that ship go to the UK as well, and then to America, or did it go straight from the Mediterranean? I wouldn't know.
Let me see if I can find it. He said it was 48 days at sea, apparently, and got the English elements here. So you would have actually gone. No, it doesn't say actually. So no, we need to find that out.
Okay. So and then he finally arrives in America in the Boston Harbor. And then in the film, in the Awake film, they kind of show the scene by playing a song that is like supposed to get the viewers in the kind of right mind for this kind of time. And I'm going to play this now.
Charleston, made in Carolina. Some dance, some prance. I'll say there's nothing finer than.
And this is and it's so happy and like but also like kind of party and really enjoy life kind of song. And but it also embodies the 20s. They're by a lot of people called the Roaring 20s, and it was like a time where America was like, it was after World War One. A lot of the soldiers came home, and there was I feel like there was an optimism in the people there, but I'm guessing also there was a spirituality lacking a bit. So perfect time for Guruji to arrive
Yes.
in the US. What do you guys think when you saw this scene, this Charleston song and those people dancing and the picture out of the boat arriving in Boston Harbor?
Oh, whenever I saw it, I definitely thought of the contrast for where Yogananda would have come from, and thought immediately this must have. I'm sure he didn't just walk on to a scene of people, spraying champagne over the place, but it does paint the picture quite well in this documentary that he would have been stepping into a world completely alien to what he would have been used to, and certainly with the mission that he had to go over and spread his teachings, I suppose, or teaching of his guru and so forth. He would have thought he probably had his job cut out for him. He really would have thought he had a lot of work to do, because the euphoria over there at the time, and the rapture really with people getting caught up in all sorts of practices. He probably thought that he was fighting an uphill struggle, and I'm sure, and I think he does say somewhere that where are the people that God sent or is to send to him, and obviously eventually they come, but I'm sure he probably looked around him and thought, it's going to take some searching, really.
Yes, for sure. I mean, we will talk about the people he meets also in the next minute and then the following one, which are his first devotees that he meets in America, which are some great personalities. Mm-hmm. It is interesting. Also, can you guys imagine the difference of atmosphere? Like, you're in India, that is still occupied by the United Kingdom, where it's like, and like the way he filled out this form where he said not liberal, but in religion. And now he comes to America, which seems to be this free country where everyone can do what he wants. And they seem to be on a liberal kind of streak a little bit. Like there's a few things that I mentioned earlier, like about the war ending. And I also saw here the Prohibition era was just about to start when he came, which is not so liberal, I guess. But women got the right to vote, which is kind of seems like the modern age is about to start over there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would have been so far advanced to where India was at the time. And still is, for somebody who maybe has never left India to go to the United States today. I'd imagine it's maybe a similar state of affairs, depending where you're from. But yeah, incredible scenes, really. And this, let's say, energy that the United States has is what propels them into the next 100 years. So Yogananda really times it perfectly, doesn't he? Because the gross age of materialism that the United States is going through currently, but it really started back then. It came at the same time as Yogananda went with his message, which is curious if you think about it. Like, I've heard that to every problem there's a solution, and there isn't a solution. Really, Yogananda is the solution to many people's need for spiritual wealth. They have a lot of material wealth, but lacking in spiritual. So Yogananda really times it perfectly to arrive.
Yeah. And then can you imagine you are Yogananda on this ship, and you are coming into Boston Harbor, and he stands on the railing and looks at Boston, and then this when the City of Sparta arrives in Boston, there's this amazing picture taken, this famous one, where Guruji is looking out. I think he's pointing his finger. He's wearing a turban.
Very smart
What do you-
jacket. It's beautiful, isn't it?
It is very beautiful, yeah. What do you guys think about when you saw this for the first time, Priyanka?
Absolutely loved it. I think we've talked about the fusion of East-West in terms of the dress, but this is beautifully personified here. And one thing that is of interest is he's cleanly shaven in this picture, and he was not, certainly was not before he left the shores of India. And by the way, I found out whilst in that intervention, when he left the shores of India, the ship had one stop, which is in Port Said in Egypt, before then going all the way straight to Boston. Yeah. So anyway, so this picture, the Boston, I've got a bit of trivia about it. A Boston Globe photographer with an eye for photogenic arrivals had the exotic visitor pose for a picture that would appear on page 7 on the next day's paper in black and white tableau with 3 other images. A comely young woman with an adorable child, and the Armenian refugee sisters Nashushe and Zaruhi Guijivan, I don't know, decked out in all matching coats and feathered hats. Yogananda is pictured head to toe in his turban and shin-length tunic, with white collars that looked like what he would now call a mock turtleneck, dark puttees, cloth strips wound around the lower leg, and western shoes. Staring at the camera with a half-pleasant smile, he is clean-shaven as a baby, and he would remain so for the rest of his days, even earning a reputation for never needing to look like he needed a shave. Some friendly shipmates had convinced him it was wise to get rid of the beard. It was the first of many times he modified or abandoned an Indian custom in America, but he adamantly refused to cut off his hair. The accompanying article identified him as Swami Yogananda Giri, again the error, a Hindu of Ranchi, India, and said he'd shocked reporters when he bid them good morning in perfectly good English. So I found that fascinating. So he decided to retain some of his Indian appearances, and you'll remember that Yogananda, Sri Yukteswar told him, "Forget you were born among Hindus, and don't adopt all the ways of the Americans. Take the best of both peoples. Be yourself a child of God. Seek and incorporate into your being the best qualities of all your brothers scattered over the earth in various acres."
Yeah.
So he seems to have started that on the ship with his hair and his beard.
Yeah, it's interesting that he, if that is true, then he took the advice of people that he met really on the ship, and it was maybe even that last minute. I guess everything was quite hurried along in the last few days, but even to that point, it's amazing just how quickly that happened, really, for him, and how amazing the job he did, just to kind of go with the flow. We shouldn't take it for granted. It's incredible.
Also the confidence, right? Like imagine you go to a different country and immediately I would say you arrive. I mean, he did that when he arrived. He didn't do this after living in America for 3 years, and he went for it right away and thought, I'm going to spend some time here in America, and I want to meet the Americans halfway. I'm guessing that's kind of the message a little bit, right?
Yeah, in the US, everybody would have been, I guess at the time, maybe it was a mustache and maybe it was a little bit of a goatee of sorts. I'm not sure what the style would have been back then, but probably more mustache, but clean shaven, and then something like that, a little twirly kind of mustache. So.
Can you imagine a mustache?
Yeah, Lahiri Mahashaya style or something.
Amazing. I would like that. Thinking a bit of about time, I think would it be okay if we moved on to the next picture that was very famous, which
The
is
video.
it's even a video, yeah.
Yes.
It's Yogananda walking down the streets of Boston with his entourage, which are the first devotees that followed him when he came to the United States, and there are some great personalities among them.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I can read. So we know about this because it's a very rare video, and it looks like very strange video. Like it's almost staged. So it's Yogananda walking with 4 people behind him, in very strange dress. And I've got some background from Phil Goldberg's biography, and it says. So basically, what happened was this is actually a much later video that was produced as something for he was touring New York, and he was going to do a talk, and someone had advised him to do a promotional video for the talk or a picture. And then this is what's written. Prominent New Yorkers showed up on November the 24th for the Gotham debut, a free lecture at the prestigious town hall, whose midtown environs were jumping with jazz and bootleg liquor. A classified ad for the event, right next to the Al Jolson, the world's greatest entertainer, who was pictured in blackface, shows Yogananda in a turban and says he'll be speaking on sensational discovery of everlasting youth. Mrs. Southwick, who would also speak, and a violinist would perform. Tickets were $1 to $3. A spread about the coming events in New York Tribune showed Yogananda, which is what we're showing, walking on the city street in a long robe and turban, his wavy hair flowing over his right shoulder to his chest. With him are 4 Americans in an unlikely garb, Indian-style flowing fabrics and headscarves for the 3 women, and a turban for the man in an overcoat. They are identified as Mrs. Southwick, Mr. and Mrs. J.E. Smith, and Sister Yogamata. And the headline reads, "A famous Swami comes to town." It was surely an eye-catching scene, even in the city where eye-catching scenes were commonplace.
Amazing. Can you imagine that? It's like you have like Yogananda going in a traditional Hindu dress, I'm guessing, but then also his 4 American companions going in like an Indian style dress code, which is pretty great. I'm guessing back in the day this was not something that people were used to at all. So this must have been quite a scene. I love that they chose the subject of maintaining eternal youth. This is probably something people cared about.
Yeah, I think that talk was a bit after his initial arrival to Boston, but they've used this video footage from that promotional material. Someone happened to be recording it as well as taking a picture of those posters that they were creating.
Right.
Yeah.
It's very, very good quality. You know, for the time. Whenever I watched it, you can still see Yogananda's garms. You know how well. I don't think they're ironed, but they're very well kept. You know, he's just pristine, isn't he? You just look at him. I think he's pristine. And when he gets closer, I just love that it's quite a long shot. This isn't just a 2-second clip of this video. You know, it's quite a lengthy shot. So he walks right up to the camera, and you can see he's maybe looking to see where he's going to walk, where he's going to go next. You can just see the glimmer in his eyes, his little twinkle in his eyes. You know, I just think it's an amazing visceral. You know, it's a really great shot, and fantastic that they really included the whole thing in the documentary.
Absolutely, yeah. Really good that they found that video, I suppose, somewhere buried in the archives.
Yes. This is, and especially the fact that this is a video of such an early time in Yogananda's life is pretty great. And there's more to come of Yogananda in the next 2 minutes, of Yogananda in Boston or in New York coming to the West, which is super interesting. We have reached the hour mark now, and I feel we also wrapped up minute 14 pretty well. Is there anything else you want to still add, Chris?
So really from me, just a reflection on the journey and the commitment and like you said, Mike, the confidence and the magnetism that Yogananda had, and it's just great to hear these stories from Phil Goldberg and to hear them being shared today. Like, I just think it's a fantastic moment for the world. Really, you know how important this is. I'm sure we can't measure. So. Amazing, really, really great to hear it personally as well. Loved it.
Great.
Yep.
And you, Priyank?
Yeah, just finally, if you guys really like that Charleston song, you can find it. The lyrics are by Cecile Mack and the music by James P. Johnson. And it was first introduced on stride piano method of playing, apparently. And it was also the featured an American Black Broadway musical comedy show, Runnin' Wild, which had its premiere in the New Colonial Theatre in New York. So if you want to know more about that video, which is a pretty cool video and song, then you can find it there.
Oh, very interesting. Amazing. So good. So this wraps up minute 14. Thank you all for listening. Thank you guys for joining. Jai
Thank
Guru.
Jai Guru. See you next time.